These are character building techniques that you need to be using in your current manuscript or in your next book, and I'm willing to bet you've probably never heard of these before. The first is laugh in the face of danger. The best way to create a memorable character is to have them react to events in counterintuitive ways. If a character always reacts predictably, like showing typical grief during a tragedy, it doesn't really reveal much about their personality. Instead, surprising reactions make readers feel like they truly know the character. A great example is Indiana Jones laughing in the face of danger. So let's take the tank chase scene in The Last Crusade. Indy is clinging to the side of a tank as it barrels through the desert, surrounded by Nazis trying to shoot him. At one point, while barely avoiding getting crushed by the tank treads or falling under enemy fire, Indy pulls himself up, gets a momentary advantage, and smirks with that signature wry grin, almost laughing at the absurdity and peril of the situation. This reaction is quintessentially Indy. Even when the stakes are life and death, he finds humor or irony in the chaos, showcasing his resilience, charisma, and unflappable nature. It's a moment that makes the audience root for him while emphasizing his unique character. Where others might freeze in fear, Indy thrives on the thrill of the adventure. So let's talk about the tips and the risks of using this. Use it sparingly and ensure the reaction is believable and rooted in the character's personality. Make sure to avoid overuse. If you use it too much, it will not be impactful at all. Number 2 is make your character carry something. A character's possessions reveal unique details about them. Look at what they carry in their pockets, their purse, or even symbolically. I'm going to use Indiana Jones again for this example with his famous whip and hat that are iconic possessions. The reason is they reveal key aspects of his character, blending practicality, resourcefulness, and personality with deep symbolic significance. The whip showcases Indy's ingenuity and adaptability. He uses it not just as a weapon, but also as a tool to swing across chasms, disarm foes, or snag objects. It highlights his ability to think on his feet and turn the unexpected into an adventure. The whip reflects Indy's approach to danger and ultimately his love for adventure. It's unconventional, just like him. It's not the brute force of a gun, but a tool that requires skill, finesse, precision, and it mirrors his clever, calculated approach to survival. And then we can't forget about the hat. The hat protects Indy, of course, from the harsh sun of the deserts that he explores, which showcases his preparedness, but also the rugged lifestyle of an archaeologist in the field. It's also a visual shorthand for his identity as a swashbuckling adventurer. It connects him to the classic pulp heroes and conveys his old school charm and unrelenting determination. One of the most telling moments comes in Raiders of the Lost Ark, when he risks his life to grab his hat as a stone door is about to close. Showing that it's so much more than accessory. It's a part of who he is. Together, the whip and the hat tell us that Indiana Jones is not only resourceful and adventurous, but also someone deeply tied to tradition and legacy, and really walks the line between a modern intellectual and an old world hero. These objects are extensions of his personality, and they serve as a constant reminder of his fearless adventurousness and spirit. The pro tip here is to move beyond the physical objects and to include metaphorical or symbolic things that they carry. For example, carrying a distrust or potentially carrying guilt will add even more emotional depth. Number 3 is to create contradictory characters. Contradictions make characters more interesting and ultimately more realistic. These are traits or habits that don't align with their stereotype, which adds depth and mystery. A great example of a contradictory character is Tyrion Lannister from Game of Thrones.
Why'd you read so much?
Well, my brother has his sword, and I have my mind.
and the mind needs books like a sword needs a whetstone.
Here are the contradictions. First is a stereotype. So as a dwarf, Tyrion is underestimated by everyone around him. Many see him as a drunken, debauched noble with little value beyond his family name. The contradiction that comes in is his intellect and his wit. So despite his physical limitations and reputation, Tyrion turns out to be one of the smartest, most resourceful characters in the story. He's an exceptional strategist, a diplomat, and a manipulator of people and events. We also have his morality that comes into play. So although he indulges in vices like drinking, visiting brothels, Tyrion has a surprisingly strong moral compass. He often displays more empathy and fairness than many of the more noble characters around him, especially towards those who've been marginalized or mistreated by society. He also has this compassion in brutality. So while living in a brutal and cutthroat world, Tyrion demonstrates a deep sense of compassion for outcasts, including Sansa Stark, Jon Snow, and even his brother Jaime. How does this add depth to his character? Well, Tyrion's contradictions make him compelling because he keeps defying your expectations at every turn. The stereotype of a cynical, hedonistic noble is subverted by his profound intelligence, emotional depth, and loyalty to those he cares about. These traits not only surprise the audience, but also make him relatable as he struggles with feelings of rejection and inadequacy, even while proving himself time and time again. This works so well because his contradictions create tension and intrigue, which drive the audience to wonder, how is he going to reconcile his sharp intellect with his hedonistic tendencies, or his noble ideals with the ruthlessness of his family? This constant push and pull between opposing traits keeps Tyrion dynamic and unpredictable, which is a hallmark of really memorable storytelling. Number 4 is 3 things to do when you introduce a character. Establish a connection with the reader quickly. A great example is using Katniss Everdeen in The Hunger Games, which was of course written by Suzanne Collins. First up, have them say something. So the first dialogue we hear from Katniss is practical and protective and directed towards her little sister Prim. When she comforts Prim and reassures her about the reaping, her words reveal her nurturing nature and establish her as a protective older sibling. One of the things she says is,
try to go to sleep. I can't. Just try.
Although that line is so simple, it shows her role as a caretaker and sets up her willingness to sacrifice herself for her sister later in the story. The other part of this is have them do something immediately, take an action right away. And so we see Katniss's resourcefulness and competence early in the book because she is hunting in the woods, skillfully shooting arrows to provide food for her family. An example, I swing the bow over my shoulder and head home. This action tells us she is not only independent, but also capable of surviving in a harsh world, traits crucial to her character throughout the series. The problem that Katniss has, which is of course another technique, is introduced almost immediately. She lives in a dystopian society where survival is a daily struggle, and she must protect her family from hunger as well as the oppressive capital. The looming reaping adds a layer of dread to everyday challenges. An example, in District 12, we call it the seam, the scrappy poor area where the coal miners live. That's home. This detail introduces her economic hardship and sets up the stakes of the reaping, where she later volunteers to take her sister's place. Katniss's introduction is so powerful because it quickly establishes her key traits. She's protective, resourceful, and determined, while embedding her in a high-stakes world. Readers immediately understand her personality, her challenges, and why they should root for her, making her a very compelling protagonist from the very start. Number 5 is to make your character likable. They don't have to be flawless, but it is really important that, of course, we like them so that we want to know what happens to them. And relatable flaws will usually make them so much more endearing. A well-known character who embodies these techniques is Harry Potter. And I'm going to show you 4 ways that J.K. Rowling achieved this. So the first thing she did was she gave Harry a strong sense of right and wrong. We will often see him standing up for others, even when it's really difficult or very dangerous. In Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, Harry defends Neville Longbottom when Draco Malfoy mocks him. Later, he willingly puts himself in danger to save the Philosopher's Stone because he's driven by his sense of justice and desire to stop Voldemort. A great one is to show them caring for animals. This communicates compassion and kindness towards creatures, a trait that really endears him to readers. In Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, Harry's empathy for Buckbeak, a hippogriff sentenced to execution, leads him to risk his own safety to save the creature. And if you really want to evoke empathy from the reader, you need to make them suffer, which of course we see with Harry's backstory. He was orphaned as a baby, and he grows up with the abusive Dursleys living in a cupboard under the stairs and has to endure constant mistreatment. Despite this, he maintains his hope, his kindness, and that makes his struggles relatable and inspiring. Finally, you need to show competence. Harry's talents and bravery consistently set him apart, which makes him admirable and likable. His skills as a seeker in Quidditch showcase his physical prowess and quick thinking, while his courage and resourcefulness in dangerous situations, such as defeating the Basilisk in Chamber of Secrets, demonstrates his ability to rise to the occasion when needed. The reason this works is Harry's likability stems from balancing these traits. His strong morals and kindness make him admirable, his suffering makes him relatable, and his competence proves he's capable of overcoming challenges. These elements combined together create a protagonist that readers can connect with and that they can cheer for throughout the series. Number 6 is give your character an odd habit. An unusual habit makes a character stand out and also hints at deeper layers. Great examples of characters with an odd habit would be someone like Hercule Poirot, the famous detective from Agatha Christie novels. Poirot has a peculiar obsession with order and symmetry, often arranging objects meticulously and keeping his environment spotless. This unusual habit immediately makes Poirot distinctive. While many detectives are portrayed as rough and unkempt, Sherlock Holmes, for example, Poirot's fastidiousness is a huge contrast, and it really highlights his unique personality. It also provides deeper layers. Poirot has this obsession with order, and it mirrors his methodical approach to solving crimes. His ability to notice seemingly insignificant details is what makes him brilliant. His need for tidiness may also hint at a deeper psychological need for control in a world full of chaos, particularly considering his career revolves around solving violent and messy crimes. He's also charming and quirky, and this trait adds a touch of humour to his character, which is only going to endear him even more to readers and again set him apart from other detectives we've seen in stories. In The Murder of Roger Ackroyd, Poirot's penchant for order becomes central to his investigation. He notices the smallest discrepancies in a crime scene that others just completely overlook, such as a chair being slightly out of place. His odd habit isn't just quirky, it's vital to his success as a detective. This all works so well because Poirot's obsession with order makes him memorable, and it reinforces his identity as a meticulous, brilliant detective. This odd habit also gives readers a much deeper understanding of who he is, and that's what makes him unique and engaging. Okay, so we're on to number 7. Well done for sticking with me if you're still here. Your characters are going to be all the better for it. The next up is to widen the perception gap, which is the difference between how a character sees themselves and how others perceive them. Walter White from Breaking Bad is a textbook example of a character with a significant perception gap.
Who is it you think you see?
How he sees himself differs dramatically from how others and how the audience see him. Walter sees himself as the family man. His journey begins believing that everything he does is for his family. He convinces himself that cooking meth is a selfless act to ensure their financial stability after he dies from cancer. He sees himself as someone pushed into crime by an unfair world, right? A victim of circumstance. He's an underappreciated teacher. He's been mistreated in his career and faced with this impossible medical bill. And so he views himself as an unrecognized genius who's been cheated out of success. Resentment towards his former colleagues at Grey Matter Technologies plays into this. His descent into crime becomes in part an outlet to prove his worth and his brilliance. But this is so different to how others see him. As the series progresses, a lot of other characters, including his wife and his partner Jesse, see him as a monster even at times. And even his enemies see Walter as dangerous, manipulative, and increasingly immoral.
I am not in danger, Skylar. I am the danger. A guy opens his door and gets shot, and you think that of me? No. I am the one who knocks.
His actions harm almost everyone around him. And despite Walter's insistence that he's doing everything for his family, it becomes clear to others that his actions are actually quite selfish and egotistical. He's driven by a need for power and control. His claim for altruism is really just a mask for his ego and his greed. And then we have the audience who perceive him again differently. They see this moral descent and they watch him transform into a desperate, sympathetic man to a ruthless drug kingpin aware of his own self-delusion. The moment Walter says, "I did it for me, I liked it, I was good at it, and I was alive," that perception gap starts to close and his true motivations are laid bare. The audience also sees Walter as deeply flawed yet compelling, someone who switches between moments of humanity and monstrous behaviour. He's a very complex character. This perception gap makes Walter White an absolutely fascinating character. We've got tension and conflict. The disparity between Walter's self-image and his reality keeps creating constant conflict in his relationship, and it fuels the plot. We've then got the tragic irony. Viewers are able to recognize Walter's true nature long before he does, which adds a layer of dramatic irony, and it keeps them engaged as they wait for him to actually confront the truth. And then there's the character development. The gradual collapse of the perception gap drives his transformation into becoming Heisenberg, offering a deep exploration of pride, power, and identity. Walter White's story is a masterclass in how a perception gap can create a compelling and complex character. Number 8 is create foils. What does this mean? Supporting characters, sidekicks, mentors, antagonists reflect and then contrast with your main character. A powerful example of foils is the relationship between Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson.
I've been reviewing my notes on our exploits over the last 7 months. Would you like to know my conclusion? I am psychologically disturbed.
How so?
Why else would I continually be led into situations where you deliberately withhold your plans from me?
Watson serves as the classic foil to Holmes. He highlights and contrasts the detective's extraordinary quality. This is done in a number of ways. First up, there's a personality contrast. Holmes is cold, logical, and emotionally detached. He often sees people as puzzles to solve rather than individuals with feelings. And then on the other hand, Watson is warm, empathetic, and he's socially adept. And he often acts as the bridge between Holmes and then other characters. There's also a contrast in skills. Holmes is a genius with unparalleled deductive reasoning and an encyclopedic knowledge of obscure facts, but he lacks practical, everyday human insight. Watson, while not as brilliant, possesses solid observational skills, medical expertise, and practical common sense. And so that complements Holmes's eccentric brilliance. On top of this, their roles contrast. So Holmes thrives in chaos and mystery, intellectual challenge of solving crimes. Watson actually provides stability and acts as a grounding influence and chronicles their adventures. His narration also makes Holmes's genius accessible to the audience. This foil works so well because it enhances Holmes's brilliance. Watson's more average abilities make Holmes's extraordinary intellect shine so much brighter in contrast. It also humanizes Holmes. Watson's warmth and humanity is a great counterbalance to how Holmes is just so aloofness, making their dynamic a lot more engaging and relatable. It drives the plot because Watson often serves as the audience surrogate, asking the questions that we are thinking, and it prompts Holmes to explain his thought process. A good example in the classic The Hound of the Baskervilles, Watson is sent ahead to Baskerville Hall to observe and report back to Holmes. While he does his best to gather clues, his limitations become evident, and Holmes later fills in the gaps with his superior deductive skills. This dynamic showcases their contrasting abilities, but emphasizes their mutual reliance. It's incredibly memorable, the Holmes-Watson pairing, because it is the quintessential example of a foil. Their differences don't just contrast, they complement one another, and it creates a partnership that's greater than the sum of its parts. Their dynamic has become the gold standard for detective and sidekick relationships in stories. Number 9, create a 3-time character. This means a character with a past, a present, and a future. A well-known example of a 3-time character is J. Gatsby. Gatsby's past, present, and future are central to his character, and they drive the narrative forward. We see that Gatsby is profoundly shaped by his past, which drives many of his present actions. For example, his humble beginnings as James Gatz and his obsessive love for Daisy Buchanan are his defining past experiences. His transformation into J. Gatsby is rooted in a desire to escape his poor origins and become worthy of Daisy's love. This is significant because this unresolved longing for Daisy and his fixation on recreating the past haunt him. They influence every decision he makes. Then, when we think about the story's present, Gatsby is a mysterious and wealthy figure who throws extravagant parties, but it's all to catch Daisy's attention and ultimately to win her back.
Sorry, old sport, I thought you knew. Please, just, I don't know what to say. Please forgive me. It's quite all right. I've had so much to drink. Yes.
Mr. Gatsby, sir, Chicago water.
I'll be in just a minute. I'm taking my new hydroplane out in the morning. Would you like to go with me?
Despite his external success, he remains deeply insecure and uncertain, and he's constantly seeking validation through Daisy's affection. His present life is consumed by this single goal. And it's significant because his current actions reveal the conflict between his external image of success and then his internal vulnerability and desperation. Then when we think about the future, Gatsby's vision of the future is a continuation of his dream to be with Daisy. However, his inability to foresee the consequences of his obsession with the past sets up for his tragic downfall. He imagines a future where he and Daisy live together happily, ignoring the reality of her ties to Tom Buchanan and the societal structures that ultimately keep them apart. His refusal to adapt his future expectations to reality is ultimately his undoing. The tragedy of his death symbolizes the shattering of his idealistic future. This works because it gives Gatsby emotional depth. The character feels real and relatable because his past is shaping his motivations, his present reflects his struggles, and his future demonstrates his hopes and his flaws. The interplay between Gatsby's past, his origins, his love for Daisy, the present, his pursuit of her, and future, this unattainable dream, creates tension and again propels the story forward. Gatsby's arc resonates with themes of ambition, loss, and the American dream, which make him this enduring and iconic character. Gatsby's life serves as a poignant reminder of how the past, present, and future are intertwined, and how unresolved conflicts in one time period can lead to a character's ultimate fate. I hope that was helpful for you. In the comments down below, let me which of those tips you are going to use next time you are creating your characters. If you would like help or any publishing services, vetted publishing professionals, then check out the links down below and have a look at this video on screen now where I talk about why 96% of all novels fail.